Under Tito, there was security. Under Tito, there was free school and university. Under Tito, well, factories even owned holiday homes where workers could stay in the summer. Some living in the former Yugoslavia, it is difficult to forget what for them were simpler times. For them, Josip Broz Tito was not a classic dictator, but someone more democratic. Well, he held the country, which nowadays is Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Kosovo and Slovenia together, despite its mix of nationalities and religions, serving as Prime Minister and then from 1953 as President of Yugoslavia until his death in 1980. Not all, though, remember Tito so fondly. After the Second World War, he's known for his secret police rounding up political opponents, notably those with Soviet sympathies. Others blame him for sowing the seeds of the 90s Balkan Wars. Despite that, though, many still hark back to the past, calling themselves Yugo-nostalgics. They even fight against what they see as extreme nationalism in Balkan countries, many of which have become some of the poorest in Europe. Michael Sztanke, Julien Alric with Milica Popovic revisit the former Yugoslavia for France 24.
Marshal Tito's Yugoslavia shattered on April the 27th, 1992. A fratricidal conflict tore apart this bloc of 6 countries and 2 autonomous regions, which had been united for nearly half a century. 27 years later, we went to the region to find out what former Yugoslavs now think of their old country. We revisited Bosnia-Herzegovina, a predominantly Muslim nation plagued by unemployment and poverty, where the scars of war are still visible. 400 kilometers away, Croatia's mostly Catholic population did not experience the same trauma as their Bosnian neighbors, even if they were not completely spared by the conflict. The country's been a member of the European Union since 2013 and has benefited from a recent wave of tourism that helped it recover from economic crisis. 2 countries with 2 different outlooks. Citizens in one say they feel like they've lost a homeland. A desire for modernity in the other has evolved into a dangerous nationalism. Both continue to search for stability. Mesha Bazarevic began his career as a footballer in this stadium in Sarajevo with his club Jelio, the club for railway workers.
The club was loved everywhere because it trained really good players. It had a very strong identity. The Yugoslavia team was mostly made up of players who'd trained and played in Bosnia-Herzegovina. 5 of us were trained here and played in the national Yugoslavian team.
Who were they?
They were Školo, Balic, BAZDAREVIC, Šajbanozovic, and Vlado Čaplić.
At the end of the 1980s, Mesha Bazarevic was the star of both Jelio and the national team.
Baždarević.
At the time, Yugoslavia was one of the best teams in the world. Sports played a political role nationwide.
I lived under the Tito era for 30 years, and I was proud of it. We had freedom, democracy, security, we played football, we had fun, we went out, and then suddenly everything collapsed.
On the 30th of May 1992, the Yugoslavian team was officially excluded from international competitions. The fate of footballer Mesha Bazarevic was suddenly overturned.
None of the countries around Bosnia went through what we went through. The stadium was destroyed during the war. It was completely razed. We didn't only need to rebuild it physically, but also spiritually as well. We had to rethink football after everything that happened.
The Jelio team's stadium in Sarajevo was bombed by Serbian forces. The war ended the careers of all the city's players. The conflict also ended the country's unity at a time that many say was more prosperous than today. A Sarajevo group of Yugo-nostalgics are meeting at the Tito Cafe in the center of the Bosnian capital. Around a drink, they share memories of a bygone era, far from the horrors of war and ethnic conflict. Some reminisce about an idealized pre-war period when their country was united and strong, when everyone had a job and enough to eat.
When we come here, we feel nostalgia for this period. We grew up in this old Yugoslav system. And this cafe is an important place for us to reconnect to the past. After having gone through this very difficult post-war period, this place helps us to face the difficulties of everyday life.
It started as a young, teenager. I started, nostalgic, listening to that music, talking about Yugoslavia as it was a utopistic country in that sense. And I think that a lot of the good things happened back then, and a lot of the good things we can take from that time, especially in a state that we live right now, in a society that we live right now, or I don't know if I can call it society.
This Yugo-nostalgia is not a political nor ideological movement, but more of a sense of loss shared among pockets of Bosnian people. Against the background of rising nationalism and economic crisis, this nostalgia for a united Yugoslavia serves as a powerful anchor. In Zagreb, Croatia, nostalgia for communist Yugoslavia is not so popular. Last September, Tito Square in the capital was officially renamed Republic Square. Among the numerous streets or squares in the Balkans which carry the name Tito, the square in Zagreb was one of the most prestigious. Despite opposition from some of the residents, the mayor of the town ceded to pressure from the far right. This man was the first to call for the name to be changed. Sztanke Hasanbegovic, the former culture minister. These days, he leads the Croatia Party for Independence.
It's not a simple story about changing the name, but a whole history of political struggle against the Yugoslav communist legacy. This legacy is like a shadow preventing our transition to an economically prosperous and above all free society. Our transition process is not yet complete.
A mi smo još uvijek usred toga procesa koji nije dovršen.
For far-right politicians like Sztanke Hasanbegovic, eradicating the Yugoslav past from Croatia is necessary in order to create a modern state. At the University of Philosophy in Zagreb, this history professor says he's worried about a return to Croatian nationalism.
In concrete terms, in Croatia today, we are destroying the monuments put up by Tito's supporters. We're losing the street names, and we are highlighting the crimes committed by anti-fascists. At the same time, we are normalizing or reducing the crimes linked to the Ustasha period and everything attached to the independent Croatian state during the Second World War. In Croatia, we do not have right-wing conservative nationalist currents, but rather nationalism that tends towards a fascism that has nothing to do with conservatives or Christian Democrats, and which draws its sources and its influences from the Ustasha period of the 1940s.
Between 1941 and 1943, Croatia was governed by a fascist anti-Yugoslav regime called the Ustashi dictatorship. Serbs, Jews and Gypsies were deported under its reign of terror before it was overthrown by Tito's troops. This period was seen as a stain on the history of Croatia. Now, the subject of nationalism is once again on everybody's lips.
How would you define nationalism in Croatia?
By a continuing lack of confidence in the state, which is entirely justified. Since the 1990s, people have been disappointed by the country's evolution.
Disappointed in the Croatian state?
Yes, by the Croatian state that the population dreamed about during the war with the Serbs, and notably the war veterans who feel like they fought for nothing.
Now citizens of a sovereign nation, some Croats prefer to forget their communist Yugoslav past and are drifting towards a more extreme form of nationalism. These changes worry rap artist YOUGOSLAVIA. With his group, he makes popular, politically engaged music aimed at fighting what he calls propaganda.
Most of the people start to go away from anti-fascism. Something happened, you know, some kind of propaganda. Start to give people some kind of fake pictures that anti-fascism is same like a fascism, you understand? And it's fucking not. It can't be. We can't let this happen. And I was expecting more from a lot of more artists and people to get out with this. And I made a song called No Pasaran. That is really direct and really explaining.
While YOUGOSLAVIA is by no means Yugo-nostalgic, he says he does understand why Croats miss the Tito years.
This system before also wasn't so good, you know. It was a little bit communist, you know. It wasn't open country, you know. It's not so cool. You had social welfare, you had for free, I don't know, medications and all this healthcare, you know, and all this shit. And the most important, there wasn't war. You know, there wasn't openly hate between Serbs and Croats or Muslims and these guys and those guys. You understand me this? So this, I think this is the most important why they miss it. In that way, I miss it too.
Between the increasingly assertive nationalism of the Croats and the sentimentality of the Bosnians, what does the future hold today for the younger generations of the peoples of former Yugoslavia? The answer may be here in JACJE'S, in the school of this small town with a significant Croat community in central Bosnia-Herzegovina. Since the end of the war, Bosnian and Croatian students tend to take classes separately in schools. So far, Nicholas's high school had managed to escape this system. But 2 years ago, the local authorities decided to bring it back. Nicholas and his friends protested and refused to be separated.
Our school is something like a home to us, so we decided to defend it as every student and human should. And afterwards, there were some emotions, like some remembrance of everything that happened in the past, and then some questions like what could have happened if the older schools, the ground schools, weren't divided into ethnical ways. So yeah, then some rage comes also up, and it all bursts like an inferno into everything.
After months of protest, Nicholas and his friends managed to persuade the local government. Schools in JACJE'S continue to study together and fight against the ethnic divisions imposed on their country.
Even when we were younger, we always wanted to be seen by what we did and not according to where we were from. The question of nationality does not matter to us at all.
It's not because he's going to a different church from mine and praying in a different way that we have to make out that we're different.
High school is the only place that really brings us together. There, we find out that we have a lot of things in common. What defines us is not religion, not morality, not our origin, where we come from. When we found out that our high school was going to be divided by nationality, we were worried about reliving the horrors of the past.
Far from the Yugoslavia of Marshal Tito and far from the ethnic wars suffered by their parents, these young high school students represent a spark of unified hope against extreme nationalist temptations in the Balkans.
Michael Sztanke, Julien, Alric with Milica Popovic revisiting the former Yugoslavia for France 24. Well, that's all from this week's edition. Don't forget, of course, you can catch it and all the previous editions as well on our website at france24.com. Thanks for watching. More news coming up very shortly. Do stay tuned.